Ooh, baby.
Good morning. Out of bounds. 105.9 The Zone ESPN.
Ooh, baby.
Brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. And Beau Ravage's BetMGM Bar and Grill is the South's premier Vegas-style sportsbook. Experience the action at BetMGM Book Bar and Grill, only at the Beau Ravage on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, on the beautiful Mississippi Gulf Coast. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. We welcome in Tom Luganbill, National College Football Analyst with ESPN. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Do you have a favorite NFL team, Lugs?
I don't. When I was growing up, my favorite player of all time to this day, in fact, my daughter's named after him, is Joe Montana. So I was always a 49ers fan, and I grew up in the state of California, but it wasn't so much being a 49ers fan, it was being a Joe Montana fan. And then the same thing occurred when he went to Kansas City before he retired.
Yeah. All right, well, we've had this discussion. I liked Montana, too. We're the same age, but I loved – you were in San Diego. I loved some Eric Coryell and Fouts and Kellen Winslow, too.
Oh, yeah, man. You ain't kidding. Dude, those were some days. John Jefferson.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh. Charlie Joyner. I mean, there were some great teams there.
They were a good team, and I love their uniforms at that time with the lightning bolt and everything. And I still remember that game, Miami and San Diego. So I was just wondering but I get it. Montana and Walsh started winning. You know, Jerry Rice, who's from here, would eventually, they had already won one, but he would eventually join the 49ers and, in my opinion, become the best wide receiver in the history of the game. But it's remarkable that he didn't go D1. He goes to Mississippi Valley State, which is an HBCU, has a great career. And then, the rest is history with Montana and Steve Young and Jerry Rice, Luke.
I mean, when you think about that time, and this is what made those NFL teams, whether it was the Steelers of the 70s, whether it was the Redskins, whether it was the 49ers, is remember, this was all before free agency.
Right.
So everything was about the draft. So if you were able to bring in a semblance of players in 2 to 3 different drafts, they all stayed there for the entirety of their career. Mm-hmm. So you had carryover each and every year. And then you had a Roger Craig, you had a Tom Rathman, you had a Brent Jones at tight end, John Taylor opposite of Jerry Rice. And this was, after having Mike Sherrard and Wendell Tyler and all them, but the whole team stayed together.
Yeah.
So it was the ultimate, if you had the right coach with the right quarterback and the right pieces, you were kind of set each and every year.
There's a book, Lugs, called Talent is Overrated that I read about 15 years ago, and they had a chapter on Jerry Rice in it and talked about his work ethic. And growing up here, we all knew about Walter Payton's work ethic, and he would come here in the off season and he would run the steps at Memorial Stadium, which was a big deal. And but in the book, Talent is Overrated, it talks about what Rice would do all in the hills of the Bay Area as far as his off-season workout program, and that other players new players that would come in would ask about it, and the San Francisco strength and conditioning program would go, "No, we don't want you. You can't do that. That's way over your head." How about that? Isn't that amazing?
It is pretty amazing. I will say this, though. You talk about work ethic, because this applies to high school recruiting. This applies to college, to the NFL and beyond. There's a reason only a very, very, very select group of players not only had the opportunity to play college football, but then move on. It's about 0.4% of the college population playing football will actually play or make an opening day roster. Well, what separates them all? Because it's not physical ability. They're all talented enough physically. It's all of the other things: work ethic, competitive temperament. We've talked about this before. It doesn't matter if you're 17 or 18 or you're 23. When the rubber meets the road, there are going to be things that are going to weed through the talent. And it's not physical ability. They're all physically capable of playing professional football. But what are those little elements that separated a Walter Payton, that separated a Jerry Rice, right? And they're littered all throughout professional sport, not just football, but you hear about like the tireless work habits of a Tom Brady, the tireless work habits of a Peyton Manning. And the guys that don't have that stuff, if you notice, they don't stay around very long.
Yeah. Walter Payton's reputation when we were kids, as far as his work ethic, was, Herculean. I mean, it was just unheard of as far as, what he would do to stay in shape with the Bears. And then Jerry comes right after him and becomes the best wide receiver in the history of the NFL. And in the book, it talks about how he trained so much that, he's not built like Chase, Jefferson, AJ. Okay. But it talked about in that book that Jerry conditioning himself to run away from people in the fourth quarter. Like, that's what he kind of hung his hat on. Like, I didn't realize that when I was a kid, and watching the games, I just knew, wow, they're good. They win a lot. And he has good numbers, but he talks about it. He was like, no, I mean, I just put myself in position to eventually people were tired and I wasn't. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but there's something to it.
Well, he's heart and determination. There were a lot of people faster, a lot of people bigger, a lot of people stronger. But heart and determination, we're saying, those are intangible traits.
Yeah. Tom Luganbill with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show. All right. Friday night's game, college football playoff. We now have Ohio State and Notre Dame. We had you on Friday. We had another game. What was before I ask you how Notre Dame can possibly overcome being an 8-point underdog, what was your one big takeaway from Friday night's game, Luke?
That finally there is some evidence on film during this playoff run that Ohio State can look mortal, right? I thought that, and again, it begins and ends up front. And we talked about this. How do you get Will Howard off platform, off schedule, people in his face, and alter the momentum and the ability of that offense to function the way it had versus Tennessee and the way it had versus Oregon? And the answer to that question was Texas up front. Well, Notre Dame's got similar players up front and has been unbelievably disruptive when it comes to creating negative plays, tackles for loss, limiting explosive plays, all of those sorts of things. And I look at this as being a game that up front, for Ohio State, how do you stop quarterback run and Riley Leonard, and how do you limit Jeremiah Love? If you are Notre Dame, how do you get Ohio State offensively behind the chains and take them out of their comfort zone? And it begins and ends up front, as every national championship game should. I mean, if you noticed in those semifinal games, all four of those teams are amongst the elite in college football in the offensive line and the defensive line. And there's a reason why they were there. And
so frame up the advantage Ohio State in the trenches, or how much? Just a whisker? Or when you look at the two units for both teams, Notre Dame and Ohio State, how would you handicap that, Luke?
On which part?
Offensive and defensive line for both teams.
Well, for Ohio State, they've been banged up all year long in the offensive line, but they've been able to overcome it, and they've made some adjustments with how they operate offensively to try to protect themselves and help protect Will Howard. More shifts, more motions, more moving of the pocket, more naked, more bootlegs to try and buy some more time for Will Howard, knowing they're not at their best up front. They're good enough, but I think they had to tweak some things to make sure that they gave themselves the best chance. And if you look, the numbers bore that out and I think I shared some of that last week with you in terms of the regular season approach versus the playoff approach with Ohio State. I think, not having Anthony Knapp, the left tackle for Notre Dame, is a big deal. If you're Riley Leonard, if you're Notre Dame, not having your starting left tackle in a national championship game, we talk about you got to have luck, you got to be healthy, you got to make sure your best players are on the field. That's going to be I think a fairly significant blow But they're both dealing with some issues in the offensive line. So you have to ask yourself, how do you contend with both defensive fronts? Because they're so disruptive. They wreak so much havoc. They can create negative plays. They can create points. We saw that with Jack Sawyer. I mean, that drive had Texas at the 1-yard line on first down and ends up losing 17 yards through the course of 3 downs and ends up being a touchdown going the other way. I mean, just unbelievable set of circumstances, but it was created by the defensive front and through Ohio State. And if you look at how Notre Dame affected Drew Aller picked the wrong day to have his worst game of the year.
Right.
Because he had not played like that in the first 2 rounds. In fact, he hadn't played like that really since maybe going back to the Ohio State game. He had really grown and developed, and he was off. And the moment he was off, and Notre Dame sensed it, they came after him. And that was the difference in the game. Can they do the same thing? Can you get Will Howard in the same type of mode of operation where he's not comfortable? That's the thing. And it's not necessarily, and I'd say this for both quarterbacks, not necessarily about sacks. It's about affecting the quarterback, forcing them to be a bit late, forcing their eyes to come down, putting them in a position where they've got to get to their second or their third read. And do you have enough time to do that? That affects the quarterback. The negative play in the sack is great, and it puts them behind the chains, but affecting the quarterback changes how the quarterback performs.
Okay. Would you be shocked, surprised, or neither if Notre Dame wins?
I would not be shocked one bit. Listen, I'm a big believer, Bo, in the stars aligning, and sometimes you have that special collection. You don't know why. You maybe had a feel about it in the offseason or in August or whatever. You'd have this special collection of the stars aligning and everything working for you and everything happening because it's quote-unquote supposed to. You get the right bounce here. You get the luck of the draw there. You peak at the right time. The quarterback comes on at the right time. You avoid a big injury. Like, all of that has gone Notre Dame's way. It's kind of like the 2010 Auburn team. They had a lot going on. And not that they weren't deserving to win the national championship. They just had one of those teams where everything went the way it's supposed to go. And I think when you're having one of those years, and it's special, that things kind of play out that way, and it doesn't matter if the other team's better. And that's not to say Ohio State won't win the game. But I'm just saying, you asked me if I'd be surprised if Notre Dame wins it. I would not be surprised one bit because I think they're having one of those years.
Okay. Tom Luganbill with ESPN on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. This is ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Let's switch gears and go to the SEC. So people love it when the SEC doesn't win it. And this is back-to-back years. And so some in the media are like, oh, my God, the league's not any good, blah, blah, blah. They're going the wrong way. But let's bring it back home going into 2025. DeBoer has his first year. He had to follow the GOAT, and at a time when we have massive disruption in the game, I think he's going to be fine and get the court. I think Milroe's talented, but I don't think that's who he wants. I think he'll get his guy in. They'll start doing their thing. Oh, if you're an Alabama fan, would you be super concerned, or do you look at it like, Bo, it's year one, he's following Saban, and they lost like 28 players in the portal because of the time that he took over and replaced Saban? How do you see it?
Well, all I know is all of the conversation in the summer that I was having with Alabama fans, or the talk of Alabama fans calling into radio shows, or posting on message boards, was, man, if we could win 9 games, that would be a great first year under Kalen DeBoer. Then all of a sudden they did, but the fans didn't like it because it didn't look good. Right? It was an ugly 9 wins. And it was. There were times where you're sitting there scratching your head because of the lack of consistency of performance. And at a place like that where you become so accustomed to seeing that and seeing them make it look easy, when it doesn't go that way, it gets over magnified. And that's just the nature of the standard they set. You become a victim of your own success. But then all of a sudden they go 9-3 and they have an abysmal performance in the bowl game. But going 9-3 all of a sudden wasn't good enough because it didn't look good. It wasn't a pretty 9-3. Okay, well, you don't get to have it both ways. I thought, first of all, Kalen DeBoer has won everywhere he's been.
Right.
He's battling a lot of turnover on the roster, and I totally agree with you. That is not the quarterback you want to play in that offense. You need a Michael Penix, a Jake Hayner, who he had at Fresno State, who was a great player for him, still in the NFL right now. You need a precision passer. And if he happens to be a good athlete, great. But what they had at quarterback, I really feel like they were having to work around. They constantly were, everything looked hard, right? And you knew you had the run game part of it, and that was great. But could you go out there and say, could this guy do what Michael Penix did at Washington? And the answer is no. That's not who he is. So whether that's now Keelan Russell, the true freshman, who I think is going to be a great player, is that Ty Simpson? Who is it? Dylan Lonergan? Who is it at Alabama that's going to be their guy? But I know they're going to be better off with more of a natural passer because I think that's what the offense requires.
Okay. What do you think Georgia does? Now, so Carson Beck's going to Miami, that number sounds inflated, but I don't know. I don't think he's worth that. But if that's what the market says you're worth, then that's fine.
Nobody is.
Yeah.
I know.
All right. So, and I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's special, but that's fine. He if he can get the money, I'm all about it. Now, what do you think Kirby Smart, and I'm assuming Bobo, do going forward at the quarterback position at Georgia?
Well, clearly they love Gunnar Stockton. They like the way the team responded. I think they like the way how he affects their locker room. The poise and composure he showed being thrown to the wolves in the SEC championship against a defense like that probably made the decision to not go all in on keeping Carson Beck. So their answer is Gunnar Stockton. And then we'll see if Carson Beck can go be as advertised. I don't know if those numbers are real. If they are, you better play good. Because if that's the type of money that's out there, you better perform. And if that's the type of money you're getting paid, you know, we just had a quarterback that was making what people say roughly half of that. Well, a lot of people would say, oh, he's a lot better player than Carson Beck, and that's Cam Ward, and he opted out making big money.
Right.
So, you know, something's got to change here.
Okay. How do you think it's different coaches, some places same in some, but you don't believe that Georgia, Bama, and LSU will ever have the depth that they once had in college football. Is that right or wrong? Because of the portal.
I don't think anybody will.
Right.
I don't think it's just Alabama, you know, Clemson, Georgia, LSU, Texas, whatever. I don't think anybody will. The difference is the ones and the twos at the Power 4 level and the Group of 5 and the FCS level are the ones that are most vulnerable. For the upper tiers, the Georgias, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, the Texas, the Alabama, it's the 3s and the 4s that you used to be able to protect, that you didn't have to play with right away, but you knew were probably going to be great players at some point. Those are the players that are departing the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Clemsons. And so it's thinning out the herd. And now when you do that, a couple of things. How are you supposed to maintain competitive depth? That's number one. And number two, how are you supposed to maintain any semblance of a team-first mentality? Like, how are you supposed to have a we before me mentality when you don't have really any of your core values or your principles, the expectations and the standards that you set for your program? It's one thing to bring in a recruiting class after a recruiting class after a recruiting class. That gets established from infancy and gets developed through 3 to 4 to 5 years. Instead, you're bringing 30, 35, 40, 42 players from somewhere else who have no established connection to the program, and we're now expected to make sure you put a good team on the field. I think that's really, really hard to do, and nobody's immune from it. Not Georgia, not Ohio State, not Texas, not Alabama. It's going to affect everybody. Now, if you go out in that transfer portal market and you decide to pay a bunch of players, and you pay the right ones, like Ohio State did,
right,
now you're going to be a success story. You pay the wrong ones, like Florida State did, now you'll see the other end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. LSU and Auburn all in on the portal. Both coaches feeling the heat. Hugh Freeze more than Brian Kelly. because Hugh's got to win this year. I think he's perfectly capable of if Jackson Arnold is what they or we or you and all of us think he could be. But I think those fan bases will have to rewire their brain a little bit, Luke's, because this is going to look more like the NFL. And the Georgias, Bamas, and LSUs, for the most part, are going to suffer losses because they don't have the depth that they once had. So, they're going to be going more 10-2s than 12-0s, like Kirby did just there for a second before this changed, and Saban got used to, and so on. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I do. And I think, we talked about this in August. What's the threshold? What's the cutoff? And I said it's 2 losses. I think if you lose more than 2 games, you're going to be in jeopardy of not making the playoff. And I think because of the transactional nature of all of these teams now, there's going to be far more 10-2s, right? Instead of a handful of 11-1s or 12-0s or 13-0s, and then a cluster of 10-2s. I think it's going to be more and more difficult to decipher the difference between those teams. They're all going to be very, very similar. And let's not forget, we can't just rely on schedule and who you played, because when you took away divisions, now no 2 schedules are created equal. It all depends on the luck of the draw.
Sure.
And so each and every year that's going to shift. That's going to change. And then I think at the end of the day, when it gets down to it and you start to see the leveling out of these teams and then becoming a little bit more comparable, that's why I think it's going to be really important that if there's tweaks to the college football playoff, the first tweak is eliminating the automatic bid to the conference champion. I think we have to go to a 1 through 12, 1 being the best, 12 being the last seed, and seed them based on who you think the best teams are. Because an Oregon who goes undefeated and wins the Big Ten should not be playing Ohio State in their first game.
Right.
I mean, that the NFL's not doing that, and nor would it be allowed.
Right.
So I think what we've got to get to a point, and some people aren't going to like it, but we got to say, hey, congratulations on winning the conference, or congratulations on getting your conference championship game, even though you didn't win it. However, that guarantees you nothing.
Right.
If we think you are better than this team, and we think that team's better than you, and they didn't win their conference championship, but you did, so be it. 1 through 12.
And I think we need to take the G5 out, and they need to have their own 14 playoff, which would be really cool. But
I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
I just think that's how it looks.
It's different. I'm telling you, and I've done this so many times. You stand there on the sideline, and I was on the sideline for Penn State Boise. And you're standing there at the 50-yard line. You turn your head to the right and your head to the left, and you're going over looking at that team in blue and white named Penn State, and that ain't Wyoming or San Jose State.
Nope.
That ain't New Mexico.
No.
That ain't Nevada. I'm sorry, it's not the same.
Luke's, enjoy the vacation. We'll talk in a few weeks. We appreciate you, man.
Sounds good, buddy. Have a good one.
Tom Luganville with ESPN on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line.
Say, kids, what time is it?
It's 9 a.m. and this ain't okay show. It's the Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds.
All aboard!
As Mississippi's #1 morning show rolls on the Zone 105.9 and online at thezone1059.com.
Yep, we were talking about Mardi Gras and king cakes earlier, and Beagle Bagel here in Madison has them. I just walked downstairs. They've got several out. And then Jackson and I were going through kind of which is the favorite. Mine would be the pecan praline, I think, in cream cheese. But I'm not opposed to the cinnamon cream and cheese. Yeah. So, boy, king cakes. I mean, Robert St. John's doing 250 a day. And then around here, you've got Beagle Bagel in Madison. You got what Jeff Good in Broad Street does. I'm sure there's more. Unreal. This is the business of 250 a day. That's awesome. And you told me that Rouse's grocery store sells how many? No way, 750,000. Is that what you told me
That's
earlier?
what they claim, 750. They account for almost half of all king cake sales.
$750,000
At $60 a piece.
At $60 a piece. Is that accurate though?
what
I'm
Rouse's
trying to
has on the
find out.
website.
I'm texting people in the business.
Yeah, I need it verified and stamped.
Yeah, I don't
trust the internet.
I don't either. That'd be 45 million. We'll see. We are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. If they get it, fine, whatever. Robert St. John said that they sell theirs for $26.95 and $29.95.
Oh my gosh, Rouse's with different packages.
Okay.
They're coming in hard with the packages. Traditional king cake package, the cheapest, lowest option they have is $54.99.
The cheapest at Rouse's is $54.99?
That's correct.
So they're doing somewhere around $40 million.
They have to be. I mean, like I said earlier,
In king cakes.
In king cakes. 45 mil.
At a profit of what 40%?
Oh, come on.
Netting $16 million? More than that.
Dude,
yeah,
way
you're right.
more than that.
You're right.
They're netting 25.
Are they still or is a private equity
I think
coming in and bought them?
I think they're bought.
They probably got swept. Out of Bounds 105.9 The Zone ESPN, the Mac Hike Auto Group text line 601-885-3776. We're on Twitter X at Bo Bounds, and then the Key City Beer out of Vicksburg, Mississippi. Man, they're doing great things. I'm so happy for them and proud for them. Key City Brewery out of Vicksburg, Mississippi. First of all, their restaurant and bar over there is amazing. But I think they're up to 800 accounts now.
Dang.
Key City Beer with the Mississippi Queen and all the wonderful beers, Mississippi, and the list goes on and on. Mi Vida, which Martin still has on tap, which is pretty awesome. Martin's in Livingston. But Key City Beer, grab some at the grocery store, service station, Fleetway Market, or at any of the local restaurants or bars that you like. Key City Beer out of Vicksburg, Mississippi. If you don't have it and you're listening and you own a restaurant bar, pick them up and celebrate local and entrepreneurs and all that. So Rouse's is doing, we don't even know what they're doing. They could be doing 40 million. They could be doing 42, 43.
Take a whack at their revenue of last year.
What was it?
1.5 B.
Okay, so they do 1.5 billion.
They have 7,000 employees over 3 states.
7,000 employees, 3 states, and you're telling me that they sell 750,000 king cakes. It's somewhere between $54.99 and $60. Okay.
They did not used to be that much.
Okay. I would just think that, but you know what? If you're that big, I guess you can set the tone.
It is the place. I mean, I can vividly remember going to Rouse's about 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
And waiting. You wait.
Really?
Oh my gosh, they start pumping them out at 5 a.m. You can go get
I
one.
mean, Robert St. John said they're doing 24/7. I think he's got like 3 shifts going through. They're doing 250, maybe 300 king cakes a day, which is amazing.
Rouse's King Cake Crew.
Okay. Oh my God, how many people is this going to be?
I have
several hundred.
It's got to be right. They
or
put
at
out,
least 200.
Says easily eclipsing 500 grand, 500,000 king cakes. Easily eclipsing.
Okay. What a business model.
That's 2 months. That's a 2-month season.
It's a 2-month season.
That's better than crawfish season.
Speaking of mud bugs, I just get so excited. I mean, mud bugs back on the show. They're opening this week. 042 and 047. Best crawfish in this area. Unbelievable. The shrimps, I talk about the shrimp every year. It's so good. Nothing better than going and getting a to-go order. And, that this time of year, you got NFL playoffs, SEC basketball, and March Madness. And then you go into SEC baseball when it gets warmer. And that's what reminds me of mud bugs. Plus, they have Mango Card on tap, Key City Beer on tap, and all kinds of fun stuff there. Wow. 2 locations in Rankin County. Mud bugs will be open this week. Very excited.
You ready for this?
I don't think I am ready because I'm sitting here doing the numbers of what Rouse's does king cake wise, and I'm just.
It's appalling.
I mean, I love that Robert St. John's created a whole new division under his. I mean, they're going to sell thousands. Yeah. He's in Hattiesburg. He's going to sell thousands and thousands of them. And good for him. I mean, I want Beagle Bagel and Madison to sell, I don't know, 500, whatever.
I got you a top 10 list of flavors from Rouse's.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want real quick, 24 flavors, 55 stores along
they
the
have
Gulf
20.
Coast.
That's
24.
Going crazy.
That's absurd. All right, top selling flavors include, these are the 10 all-time customer favorites, strawberry cream cheese.
Okay, that wouldn't be mine, but I get everybody's got their own
like
thing.
That. I do like that. Bavarian cream. I don't know anything about Bavarian cream.
That sounds like something that I could probably get into. Go ahead.
Praline and apple.
No, but the praline, yes. I love pralines.
As well as flavors including caramel.
I love caramel.
Same.
Love caramel. Anything praline, caramel, pecan, all in that window. Go ahead.
Caramel should be a superfood.
Well, caramel is. I mean, if you get a good caramel cake with a good glass of red wine on a Friday night, you're living right. Go ahead.
Got cherry.
No, I don't like cherries.
Chocolate is on there.
I do like chocolate.
I've never seen
if you did some kind of combo of chocolate, praline, pecan,
that would
cream cheese, I could do that. Or good. Caramel. Jeff Good brought one up. He brought you were right. You were here then.
Yeah.
He brought like 3 up.
Yeah, he did. 3.
And I went
I went
with the pecan one.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Of course, after that, we're coming in with blueberry. Here's one that I don't know much about, but
I love blueberries.
Me too.
And I love fresh blueberries from from farmers markets. I don't want a blueberry king cake.
No.
Go ahead.
Sounds weird. After the blueberry, we have cookies and cream.
That sounds kind of cool. I wouldn't eat a lot of it, but
sounds
like a half of a slice could be pretty good just to try it.
No doubt. All right. Rounding out the top 10, coconut.
All right. So I love a coconut cake. I didn't get it this past year. That probably surprised you, but now it doesn't go up to over caramel and chocolate because that's my favorite. And anything like I said, pecans and things like that. But
12-month production line.
They do it year round.
They do year round. We got to think now that obviously being where they are,
sure. South Louisiana. I mean, they're in other areas,
right? But king cake's not limited to just Mardi Gras for them. If you go to an LSU tailgate,
that's right.
You can guarantee there's going to be a purple and gold king cake.
I need to ask Joe Knockin from Independent Roofing Systems how many. That's all they know. So it's year round. We got to get Jermaine Benoit on. She's even from further south than New Orleans. Remember, she described she's like Mike Detillier and Ed Ogeron area.
The thick of it. That's right. Maybe she'll know a little bit about it.
She's got to bring us a king cake.
That would be even smarter on her part.
Oh, man, this is going to happen. Health coach to the stars, Jermaine Benoit she's going to bring us a king cake. Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com, and the Saints and the NFL coming up at 9:30. I think Cam Matthews is trending into the Dak, Jake Mangum, Tanner Allen, Jeffrey Simmons space. I think that's how important. First of all, he stayed his whole career. I think this is going to be a valuable thing. I was talking to a guy in Humphrey Coliseum that runs a pretty damn big business on Saturday night, and he said something interesting as the game was unfolding, and it was a very intense game between Mississippi State and Kentucky. And for a minute there, you thought it was going to get away from MSU, and they came roaring back. And kudos to Jans and the resiliency of Cam and Josh and Melendez and all the guys who were playing. And credit to Kentucky for going in a hostile environment of a crowd that was amazing and knocking down 16 threes. But this guy and I were talking up in the little foyer area, whatever. We were standing up watching the game. Y'all know I can't really sit down and watch the game. And so I was kind of moving around the college. They did such a good job renovating it. It's pretty and it's open and it's, so much better and all that. But he said something too. I thought about Cam Matthews has been in Starkville for a long time. You got a lot of players hopping around the country. And he said something. This guy's been very, very, very successful. And he said, I'll hire that guy. And I thought about that. The guys that are transferring to 3 different schools, they don't really have an alma mater or an alumni-based network to pull off of. I mean, I went to Mississippi State. Some of you listening went to Ole Miss or Bama or LSU or Southern Miss, and you were there for 4 or 5 years. You may have done grad school, but you built a base of friends, right? Foundation of friends, and through whatever you were doing, you met like the guys that were men and women that were older than you. They left, but you got to know them. So when if you knew a senior and he was leaving when you got there, but that was cool a couple of years later, 8 years later, whatever. And that really resonated with me, talking to this guy who's older than me, been super successful. Like, I'll hire that guy. It was almost like, you better get in line because I'll be the first one. Now, I don't know what I would have told you Cam can't play professionally. This shows you what I know. Now, I did call Keyshawn Murphy as far as his skill set. He needs to continue to get better. He's still, believe it or not, raw, but he's got insane talent. But you know what? Here's what I'll say. I know you got to be able to shoot. But, man, if I'm Cam Matthews in the off season, depending on who you can get hooked up with, I'm working on ball handling 5 hours a day. Because if you're that big and and shooting, but if you're that big and that athletic, he's still growing as a player. Steph Curry was not supposed to be. Nobody was talking about Steph Curry in undergrad being one of the best players to ever walk this earth in the game of college basketball. He kept getting better. It does happen. I don't know. It's like Jake Mangum. I would never tell somebody like that you can't do anything. Yeah. Jackson Dart, I'm not going to tell him he can't do anything. Guys that are wired like that are on a different level. I think Cam Matthews is now in the Dak, Jake Mangum, Tanner Allen, Jeffrey Simmons, and I guess another basketball player would be either like Daryl Wilson or either Timmy or Derek Zimmerman. They were just not just great players, but played for a long time and became 0.01% favorites. Now, there's a lot of favorites out of Starkville and Oxford.
Sure.
But there is a hierarchy. There is a Mount Rushmore, not just 4, but you can have more than that. But there is a Mount Rushmore. What Cam Matthews is doing on the basketball court, I hope you soak it in. Seriously. And he left everything on the – I mean, did you see him the last 4 minutes of the game? I mean, I'm sitting there watching him that last time out, and I'm thinking, they got to get an IV in this kid. He left it all out there. 19 points, 10 boards, 6 steals, 3 assists. What are we talking about here?
Jeez.
That is crazy pills in college basketball. The pros, you play longer, different game, shot clock, so on, skill set, and it's still difficult to do that in the NBA because those guys are so damn good. Cam Matthews is special. Special. We talked about Jackson Dart. He just had a special career at Ole Miss. Uber competitive, leader, everything that Lane wanted. Chris Jans, 20 years from now when Jans is on the beach, Cam Matthews will be one of the 5 players that he thinks about. Wherever the stops were, New Mexico, Mississippi State, hopefully he stays. Maybe he goes, he can, at any SEC team, you can go to the Final Four. That's the way basketball is set up. You can have 2. I mean, look what he's got right now. He's got Matthews, Hub, and Kugel, and you could argue, you could kind of, depending on what's happening, rotate through Melendez, Murphy, whatever. I mean, this is a team that could get hot and win 4 games in the tournament. They could get bounced in the first round. They could win 4 games. That's the way it's like college baseball. Jake Mangum sat in here last year and said the best team I played on didn't make the College World Series. You don't ever know the matchup you're going to get in the postseason. I mean, Cam, I'm watching him with 3 minutes left to go in the game. I'm thinking, does he have anything else? And then he kept making plays. But I hope you celebrate him because you don't get players like this every year, much less every 4 to 6 years.
Yeah.
Like Dak, Mangum. Or on the Ole Miss side, they're thinking Elko and Jackson Dart.
Right.
Among others. He's good. Now, in college basketball, he's great. He's a great player. But his ball handling skills and his ability to see the floor. He's an unselfish player.
Yeah,
at a time when, that's not necessarily what the AAU circuit embodies.
In fact, it's the opposite.
I mean, I know if I was running a company, I'd hire Cam Matthews yesterday because he's just got the stuff that we all want to have and we want our kids to have and so on. It's the intangibles.
Yep.
We're very lucky.
What Demi Moore told us about.
Oh, yeah. I watched that again over the weekend. I had a conversation with Wendy about it.
Okay, that not the flick, the acceptance award.
Yeah,
the acceptance speech.
So
okay,
I told her about it.
Sure,
and she said I saw a little piece of it on TikTok, and I said, well, watch the whole 2 minutes and 24 seconds of her accepting her award and never winning anything for 45 years in acting, which blows my mind as talented as she is. I watched Landman last night.
Nice.
I mean,
almost.
Billy Bob Thornton, John Hamm, Allie, whatever her name is, and Demi Moore are just, and others. Taylor Sheridan is so talented as a writer, it's almost not fair. I mean, I thought about what it would take to write those episodes. I was like, I couldn't even write 2 minutes of it. I mean, speaking of the GOAT, like Cam Matthews and Jackson Dart,
right?
Taylor Sheridan.
Go.
Landman.
Go.
Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com,
Also
NFL Hall of Fame voter next. All right. Good show today. Lot to cover. We didn't get to everything, but there was just too much going on Thursday through Sunday with the college football playoffs, SEC basketball. Y'all are going nuts. And then the NFL playoffs. And, of course, we've got another game tonight. We'll see how that shakes out. And Saints have an opening for their head coaching position. And we're going to talk to the man, Jeff Duncan, Times-Picayune, NOLA.com, Hall of Fame voter, Saints Insider. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. And we are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. And Bo Ravage's BetMGM Book Bar and Grill is the South's premier Vegas-style sportsbook. Experience the action at BetMGM Book Bar and Grill, only at the Bo Ravage on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Jeff Duncan, good morning. How you doing, man?
Doing good, Bo. How you doing, buddy?
Well, I'm doing well. Do you think this Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions, who's been tied to the Saints, do you think this is a done deal as far as he's the next head coach for Who Dat Nation?
No, I think that's too presumptuous right now. I mean, Mickey Loomis is overseeing this search along with, the rest of his trusted lieutenants in the organization. And I can tell you, Bo, they keep their cards close to the vest. So I would think he's definitely a strong candidate and certainly would put him at the top of the list. But I don't think they've gotten that far down the road. I think they want to thoroughly complete the process of interviewing people before they probably will narrow it down to a second round of interviews in the next week or so.
Okay. So Mickey Loomis has been there even before Breeze, as you know, and Peyton. And he's so tied in with the ownership group and Miss Benson. Having said all that, and because he's like the executor of this or that, and he's such a big part of the Saints, Pelicans, and all this, is there still a lot of pressure? As successful as he's been, and he was a big part of the big run, how would you frame it up? Is there still a tremendous amount of pressure on Loomis to nail this hire, Jeff?
Oh, well, I think this is a critical hire for the organization in light of how things worked out with Dennis Allen. I think it's important, for Mickey Loomis's legacy. He will always have the hire of Sean Payton on his resume, and that was the most important hire in franchise history, led them to get Drew Brees, and the rest is history. But since Sean Payton and Drew Brees have left the building, Mickey Loomis has struggled to match that success. And I think personally he feels that. I know he does. So there's, I think, a lot of pressure, both personally and organizationally, to get this right for a lot of reasons. And there's no doubt the Who Dat Nation, Bo, when they turn their crosshairs, they usually get a scalp. I mean, they went after Pete Carmichael a year ago, and he got fired. They turned their wrath on Dennis Allen. He was fired midway through the season, and they're frustrated, and they've squarely turned on Mickey Loomis like I haven't seen before.
Really? Okay. But I guess where I'm going is he still untouchable because of his relationship and with Miss Benson?
That's a good question. I think it's fair to say Mickey Loomis can kind of write his own, future.
I agree.
I don't think he's ever going to be fired.
Right.
Now he could move. You mentioned maybe moving into a new role. I could see something like that happening, but that would be his decision. I think. I don't ever see him being moved out. He's just too entrenched in the hierarchy
right.
of the organization. He's not the typical general manager, as you pointed out. I mean, he's the longest tenured GM in the league by far.
Wow.
And he's had success here. And then he, for better or worse, he sided and supported Gail Benson in the infamous family feud. And so she's extremely loyal to him because of that. And, I think everyone in the organization has kind of earned that. And I think that's part of the problem there, to be honest with you, is the tight-knit management and ownership of the organization is a strength and it's a weakness.
Yeah.
Because there's really no outside voice, vision, or ideas. And so I do think there's some room for some fresh ideas there. And I think that's what a lot of fans would like to see.
Okay. And then it's a matter of who they're willing to bring in to possibly listen to, is what you're saying. Okay.
But I would say this, Bo. I mean, now you could argue how different of a voice is this, or how different it is. But he did hire Dave Ziegler, who was the former general manager of the Raiders, who is from outside, and he's now in the scouting department and is part of the front office. He brought back Randy Mueller, who I know Randy hired Mickey, but Randy's been a part of different organizations around the league, Miami, San Diego, well, the Chargers. He brought him in back in this past year. So he is at least seeking outside counsel, guys that have been in the general manager seat in other organizations in the last year. So I do think that is a sign that he's looking for some, counsel and advice from outside this building.
Jeff Duncan, Times-Picayune, NOLA.com, wrote the book Peyton and Breeze, which is excellent. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Saints fans are ready to get this thing going again and get back in the postseason. Do you believe that they have that they're down to 3 candidates, or do you think, Jeff, that no, Bo, it's still wide open and they're really looking deeper than just a few guys? How do you see it right now, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I think the latter. I think they're wide open. I think, they realize how important this hire is. And I think they're casting a fairly wide net. We're going to talk to Mickey Loomis today for the first time. He's having a press conference at 11 o'clock. Okay. And it's going to be an entertaining session because he hasn't spoken since the start of the season, including he hasn't spoken about firing Dennis Allen. So there's going to be some fireworks today, Bo. We're going to learn a lot about the coaching search. And I think, one of the questions I have is, they have not looked, as far as I can tell, into the college ranks. I don't know if he has some stipulations or some prerequisites that he's looking for in the next head coach of the Saints, because it seems like they're following a similar pattern of mainly, aspiring, ascending assistant coaches in the league and a few other assistants that maybe have been head coaches before. But I haven't seen any college coaches or maybe even, retired NFL coaches that might want to get back in the game. It seems like he's got a type, if you will, of who he's looking for.
Okay. Jeff Duncan on the Out of Bounds show. Well, Mike Vrabel to the Patriots. I thought he did a hell of a job in Nashville, but you keep up with this way more than I do. So, and I think it's a really good hire. How do you see it, Jeff Duncan?
Yeah, I thought that was a no-brainer. And look, that's why Robert Kraft moved off Gerard Mayo after 1 year. Gerard Mayo had been a player and coach with the Patriots for 17 years. Very loyal Patriot way guy. But Robert Kraft, I think, shrewdly realized if he did not move off of Gerard Mayo, he was going to lose Mike Vrabel to the Raiders, where Tom Brady is now a part of ownership, and who is largely league circles running that team now in a lot of ways, at least the football operations. And he was going to probably hire Vrabel. That's why they moved off Antonio Pierce. Both these organizations fired coaches after 1 year, I think, to get their hands on Mike Vrabel. That shows you how valued he is in the coaching community. And I think the Saints ever really had a shot at him, because I think those two organizations were going to get him. One of those two was going to get him. And I agree. Why I thought he was a perfect fit for New Orleans, not only does he come from the Belichick-Parcells tree, which I think so highly of, having covered Sean Payton, but also he'd been successful in a smaller market like New Orleans with a very similar ownership group. I mean, you have the Strunk Adams family that runs that team. It's a very similar situation to New Orleans, and it's difficult to win in these smaller markets like that. You're up against it to some degree, and he was successful there. And I thought that would some of those same traits he used to be successful there would work in New Orleans.
So you do think it's more difficult to win in even though the NFL is set up with the salary cap and the draft, and everybody's making a tremendous amount of money, you still think it's more difficult in the smaller markets?
Yeah, I do. I mean, look, Green Bay, I think, shows you can, but you really have to hit, I think, in the smaller market on a quarterback. I know that goes without saying probably for every organization, but if you just look at it historically, Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, enormous success in Kansas City. Green Bay has had a great run of quarterbacks. New Orleans' major success was with Drew Brees. Pittsburgh, that long success they've had has largely been tied to great quarterbacks. They're struggling since Ben Roethlisberger retired.
Right.
And look at their history.
Right.
So I do think you can do it, but as one general manager told me once, you sort of feel like you're the Washington Generals when you're in a small market in the NFL. All things are equal, but somehow it doesn't feel that way inside the operation.
Okay. All right. Well, who do you believe is this NFL insider Jeff Duncan on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line? Do you think there's a franchise that's a sleeping giant? Or maybe it's Detroit now. You're very familiar with Dan Campbell because he was one of Sean's top lieutenants. But is there a franchise that hasn't won as much as you think they should have won the last 20, 30 years, that if they get the right guy in place, you're like, that's a place you should be able to win and thrive in the NFL? Jeff?
Well, I think talking to Sean Payton about this when he was looking for a job a few years ago, he's a big believer that it starts at the top in ownership. That's the most important factor, really, how well an organization is run. So I do think Jacksonville has an opportunity there. I think Shad Khan has had some bad luck in running that team. Maybe some unfortunate hires, the Urban Meyer experiment, things like that. But I think that's viewed as a little bit of a sleeping giant down there. They're going to get a stadium renovation, I think, or maybe even a new stadium, I think. We mentioned Nashville. Their ownership is certainly questionable right now, but they've got a $2 billion stadium on Lambeau.
Wow.
And I'm sure we've talked about this before. Nashville is a boom town.
Oh, yeah.
So major resources there. I don't think you can say that Denver qualifies as a sleeping giant because of their history, but with that ownership group there and Sean Payton running things and Bo Nix's rookie season, I mean, they're going to be a factor in the AFC.
Agree.
So those organizations stand out to me right now as bright futures, along with Detroit. I mean, if Detroit gets down here in the Super Bowl, it's going to be nuts. They've never even been to the Super Bowl.
Never been.
They are an original NFL franchise. It's going to be off the hook with the Detroit Lions fans.
Yeah, I mean, people forget, Jeff. They're kind of they're not a blue blood winning wise, but like you said, they're one of the original franchises. I mean, they've been playing forever up there with Pittsburgh and Philly and New York and all those. All right, so if Dan Campbell pulls this off, holy smokes! All right, where did I want to go? Oh, I tell you two though that I still believe are in the right spot, and that's because of weather, state income tax, and all that. If Tampa Bay and Miami, and obviously Tampa Bay has proven they can win two in the 2000s with two different coaches. Miami will see. Speaking of, what do you think about Mike McDaniel? I mean, he's the young hotshot guy coming out of the Kyle Shanahan tree, which everybody wanted to touch the Shanahan-McVay deal. Now it'll be interesting to see if Dan Campbell's the new hot thing in the next 24 months, and you want to hire one of his assistants because, we think Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson are gone eventually. How do you see that with Miami and Mike McDaniel, Jeff?
Well, I agree with you. I do think that's a sleeping giant. They've underachieved considering their resources and ownership there. I do think that the star is cooled on this McVay-Shanahan offense. I mean, the league is caught up to a lot of it. We saw that this year. I mean, Clint Kubiak came in. Everyone thought he was going to, renovate the Saints offense. I know they had a ton of injuries, but they ended up scoring less points and gaining fewer yards than they did under Pete Carmichael.
Right.
So I do think if you look at the teams that are probably considered the elite franchises, the elite contenders for the Super Bowl, none of them are these Shanahan-McVay offenses. So I do think, that star is cooled a little bit. And I do think Mike McDaniel needs to win next year, or I think he's going to be on the hot seat. They're impatient down there. They want a winner. That's why they tried to lure Tom Brady and Sean Payton there a few years ago and got fined the first round draft pick, docked it. And I feel the same way about Tampa in that they have enormous possibility at Tampa to be, and they've won 4 NFC South championships in a row, but they still feel like they're underachieving. They don't go anywhere. There's really no hope that they're going to win a Super Bowl now that Tom Brady's gone.
Okay, I got to ask you this. I don't like getting on the soapbox, but every now and then, what do you make as somebody who's as close as you are to the NFL and Sean and all these other guys and people you talk to? What do you make of the NFL? They can have as many assistants and assistants to the assistants and analytics guys of teams that can't manage the clock. Jeff Duncan, how does this, I mean, as many hours as they put in, as many employees as they can hire, unlimited resources. I remember you telling me at dinner a couple of years ago, Bo, all these teams are making an insane amount of money. What do you make of clock mismanagement, even this day and age, with all the people you have around you?
Yeah, I agree. It's crazy how many games I watch. I mean, it just happened in the Bucks game yesterday, right? Right before halftime. So I don't get it. To me, it's very simple. The time, you have to control as much of that time as you can, and letting it. There's I think, overvaluing the timeout and what it means. I've talked to Drew Brees about it. There's just such a high premium on having that available to you because it allows you to open up the playbook and throw passes over the middle as opposed to the sidelines, and it keeps the defense in a certain type of defense. I still think that's way overrated, in my opinion. And I think that's what leads to this all the time is preserving that timeout so you have the open playbook. I've seen it happen over and over, and I agree. I mean, these front office staffs, these coaching staffs, it's incredible now how many coaches they have and analytics, the resources, but it comes down to that head coach, the guy on the sideline making that call, and they seem to freeze up too often for my liking.
Yeah. Okay. If you were a general manager and you had an opening, throw Vrabel in. Okay. And you could hire not sitting head coaches, yeah, but guys that weren't coaching or coordinators. And Jeff Duncan is a GM somewhere. Who would be, it may be Ben Johnson, maybe Vrabel, maybe someone else. Who would be number one on your list, Jeff?
Well, I might surprise you. The guy that I'm intrigued by is not even in the NFL. People in NFL circles are really high on Matt Campbell, the head coach. Well, actually, I should say number one on my list would be Marcus Freeman.
Marcus Freeman. Wow.
The most impressive coach I've come across. I dealt with him down here at the Sugar Bowl a few weeks ago, how he handled that crisis that we had on New Year's Day and delaying the game, how he handled his team, and then just the way he calls a game, the presence and poise. I was telling some of my colleagues, Bo, if you're a high school top recruit, why would you not want to play at Notre Dame with that coach? I mean, the way he carries himself, to me, he's a superstar in the profession, and he's going to have really his choice of where. I mean, he's at Notre Dame. It doesn't get really much bigger than that. But if he were ever to jump to the NFL, I think he could pick his suitors. I
like that. I do. Love Marcus Freeman. In this
I'll
wild.
give you another name, though. Another guy that a lot of people haven't heard of that's going to be a great head coach down the road is Jesse Minter. He's the defensive coordinator right now, but he was at Michigan under Harbaugh.
Yeah.
His dad, if you remember, was Rick Minter, who coached at Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati, was a longtime college and NFL assistant, well-regarded. And he's done an incredible job for the Chargers. I mean, it's just a matter of time until he becomes a head coach. And he's one that not a lot of people are talking about because the flavor right now is to get the next O'Connell, like the next offensive mind. And Joe Brady will certainly, have his chances. I think it'll be interesting to see if Joe Brady makes the leap to head coach. I have a lot of respect for him. I've worked with him here. But there is a difference when you get into that head coaching seat. And I think Dennis Allen's learned that. I think Dennis Allen's a terrific coordinator, but probably not suited to be a head coach. And I think the jury will be out on whether Joe Brady can make that leap or not.
That's a great point. We'll leave it there. Jeff Duncan and the New Orleans and Saints press will visit with Mickey Loomis today at 11 a.m. And Jeff made a great point that he hadn't even made any kind of comments since letting go of Dennis Allen, and evidently hasn't really talked to everybody since training camp. So this is a big hire in New Orleans to get this thing back rolling. All right, Jeff Duncan, we have to do this again soon. I'm going to be down there a couple of nights for the Super Bowl. I think I'm going Wednesday and Thursday night, and then I'm getting out of there.
Oh, let me know.
Yeah.
Let me know. I'm holding court at Clancy's every night, so you'll know where I'm at.
Ooh, all right, I'm meeting you there. Jeff Duncan, we appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Anytime, Bo. Take care.
NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, Hall of Fame voter, and we will talk Eli and all that, and the class of 2025. He walked us through the process a few years ago of the Hall of Fame voting, and I thought it was really, really good. But the Saints, Jackson Meadows is a Saints fan. Remember, Blake was a hater. Blake did not like the Saints and did not like the fact that growing up, he always got the Saints. Now, the platforms and the streaming are different. You can, for not too much money, you can get whatever you want. And you got the red zone and everything else. But it was funny listening to Blake talk about how he was a Cowboys fan, but he had to watch the Saints as a kid, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 years old. But Meadows.
Like to win? Not a winner?
Oh, wow.
Last time they won a playoff game outside of that Dak one.
Dak?
He never saw them win one as a kid, right? He never saw them win a playoff game.
There weren't many because he missed the 3 Super Bowls in the 90s because of y'all's age.
Right.
So as of late, there haven't been many wins. I think Romo got a couple, and Dak's beat Seattle and Tampa Bay. And other than that, it's been we talk about it all the time. Jerry and Steven have not had any success post Jimmy Johnson at the level that they want.
Right.
They've had plenty of double-digit 10-win seasons.
Sure, those are pretty.
But you look, I'm watching this all morning. Pittsburgh Steelers fans are going nuts because Mike Tomlin has lost 6 playoff games in a row.
Right. 6.
But they're not moving off of him. That's not what the Pittsburgh Steelers do.
They're successful.
Well, who are you going to go? Can you guarantee that you're going to upgrade? Maybe you can, but can you? It's just not the Steelers' MO. They've had 3 coaches, Noel, Cowher, Tomlin.
That's it.
We are the Out of Bounds Show. Lunch today brought to you by Martin's in Livingston. Whether it's the blue plate, a burger, or a shrimp po' boy, Martin's in Livingston serving up delicious food, lunch and dinner.